get started, I would like to introduce KYZEN's own Eric Bromley.
Thank you, Chelsea, and welcome everyone to today's episode of the KYZEN Tech to Tech series. This is actually a continuation of some previous Tech to Tech presentations that we had given, the most recent one being titled The Ongoing Battle of Corrosion on Steel. This session, we're going to focus mostly on aluminum parts. And the title is Simple and Effective Ways to Protect Your Aluminum Parts. And we're going to really focus on methods of identifying and preventing them. Before we get started, a couple of things. First off, the word corrosion and rust are often used interchangeable when speaking about different issues. And just for clarification purposes, corrosion is the process by which certain materials, metals, and nonmetals deteriorate as a result of oxidation, and rust is oxidation of iron in the presence of air and moisture. So when aluminum, you're talking about corrosion, and steel and iron and things of that nature, you're talking about rust. And the picture to the right is obviously a very badly rusted piece of steel. Another phrase that's commonly used generally is aluminum. And as we know, their aluminums are not all the same. There are many grades of aluminum that are used for their ability to be machined, their strength, or even their pliability, or their ability to be used in long punch or drawn processes rather. It's the same as saying the word beer. As we know, there are many, many different types of beer, but they're all referred to as beer. And good representation, and these ironically are also aluminum as well. So as I mentioned, there are many grades of aluminum used in manufacturing, the most common being 3003, 5052, 6061, 6063, but there are many others. And again, those are chosen by the components that are being made and the process as well. There are many different versions of makeup to consider. So are you seeing white spots? That's a very common issue in cleaning with aluminum. We're going to go over some of the common causes and some areas that you could possibly look at to correct these problems. This picture is very extreme, but it's a good representation of what you could see. Some of the typical sources of aluminum spotting that could be related to the cleaning process would be incomplete soil removal, the rinse process, the rinse water quality itself, and even the drying process itself. And we'll expand on these topics a little bit more. Incomplete soil removal, it could be the cleaning chemistry may not be doing the job for you. If it's not completely removing the oils and coolants, it'll pass through the rinse, and when the parts come out of the cleaning process, either through the rinse or the dry, you'll see spotting or streaks that could be a result of poor cleaning. Mechanical energy issues with the cleaning equipment can also cause these spotting and streaking. If it's a cabinet spray washer, maybe the nozzles are not working up to their full potential, or they're misaligned. If it's an immersion process, the spray under immersion pumping, the pumps may not be working correctly, or the filters could be partly plugged. If you're using ultrasonics, the ultrasonic energy, some of the transducers could be failed or just not aligned correctly, so you're not getting the full benefits of the cleaning process, and that will cause some in the end will cause some streaking and spotting. Low bath temperature can also do it. If you're not getting the wash bath hot enough to activate the cleaning chemistry or solubilize the heavy oils and greases, again, they'll pass through the rinse and they'll end up as spots or streaks on the parts. Another thing to consider is the pH levels of the actual soils being removed. There are quite a few coolants that are very low in pH and chlorinated, and there's a lot of oils and grease, many that are used in the industry today, and many of them are very aggressive. So the pH level of those can affect the outcome on your process. The rinse process itself is also a big factor. Naturally, poor water quality. If the tank doesn't have really good water in it to start with, then there can be a problem. It will cause streaking and spots once it's dried. If it has excess drag out or carryover from the wash tank is another cause. If your parts or your fixtures are carrying over from the wash chamber into the rinse chamber or in a cabinet spray washer, if it's not cleaning the inside of the cabinet well enough, there'll be remaining wash chemistry and even some solids and soils that could dry onto the parts and cause spots. The rinse tank temperature, much like the wash tank, excuse me, that is very critical. In some cases, if the rinse temperature is too high, the result will be as the parts are removed from the rinse, any remaining droplets will flash dry. And if there's any solids or any minerals in the water, as the water flashes off, it'll leave spots. So too high of a temperature can be a problem as well. And poor rinse filtration is a very common cause. If the rinse tank is allowed to build up the chemicals that are dragged in from the wash cycle or just the soils, if there's not good filtration on the rinse process, it will start to transfer onto the parts and result in spots and streaks. The rinse water quality itself is also a factor. The incoming water, the high mineral percentage, if you have a lot of calcium or salts in the water that's feeding the machine, these will dry as spots on the parts. And to go along with that, an inadequate supply filtration. If you know you have a water quality issue, but you don't have adequate filtration to remove these hard metals and these salts and the calcium prior to going into the machine, then the problem is just going to show up as spots. The rinse tank refresh rate is something that should be considered, and this is more for batch cleaning processes, where you want to have a small amount of fresh incoming rinse water to make up the rinse tank constantly. You will lose some through drag out and evaporative loss, but it's a good idea to have a small amount that goes into the rinse tank to allow it to, at a small rate, but it constantly refreshes itself. And along with the rinse water quality, one note is that high purity DI water can actually etch some of the softer aluminums. So if you are seeing a problem where some of your parts are becoming etched, or you're seeing some markings on the aluminum, it could be the purity of the water used in the rinse rather is just it's too high. Another source of spotting that's not really related to the cleaning process would be what's referred to as galvanic corrosion, also known as bimetallic corrosion. This occurs when two dissimilar metals are immersed in a conductive solution and are electrically connected. Basically, where a aluminum and the non-aluminum part meet, there's a small current there, and it increases the corrosion and spotting. These are pictures of a worst case scenario, but I think it does represent what you're looking at, what you could be looking at. Some of the corrective actions for galvanic corrosion would be to earth ground the wash system. Many systems already are, but in some cases, the robotic arm of the transfer systems that move the baskets from one chamber to the next in a multiple tank system, those may not be grounded either to the machine or earth grounded. So that's something worth checking on. Isolating the parts from the baskets or the fixtures, that's probably the easiest, or the second easiest besides the earth ground. That's the easiest way to correct this issue, by insulating the parts from the metal baskets with nylon or rubberized mats or things of that nature. It'll keep them from touching the metal altogether. And in some of the larger wash baths, or if it's really a big problem, there's even cases where you would provide a sacrificial zinc anode into the bath itself, and it attracts this charge and gets depleted. So the zinc anode basically corrodes rather than the aluminum and the parts. So some of the other sources that are not related to the cleaning process would be marks on the surfaces of the parts due to contact with the baskets themselves. If they're laying flat on the basket, and especially if you have ultrasonics, they could make a mark where the parts are touching a tip of the basket or the corner. It could leave a mark there. As I mentioned, the ultrasonic frequency damage, if the frequency is too high, or if the parts are left into the ultrasonics too long, they can actually make a mark on the aluminum itself. Not so much spotting, but it can make a streak or a mark. The parts touching each other during the cleaning process can also cause issues, especially if it's a heavy plate where they have a tip or a small section that's contacting another piece. This can cause not only a spot for some damage, but it can also collect some water droplets. And without a good drying process, the water will dry there and leave a spot. Handling and transporting after cleaning can also cause some spotting too. If you remove the parts from the cleaning process and put them into a dirty basket or a dirty transport method, or you're moving it around with dirty hands, you can put some spotting back onto the parts and just really cause damage that could be prevented for sure. So in conclusion, not all aluminum is the same. The cleaning process is a very important step. If you can't get the parts clean, then you won't be able to adequately rinse them, and the result will be spotting and streaking. The rinse water quality is very important. We have a saying that you're only as clean as your final rinse, and this is really proof to that fact. If their rinse water becomes clouded or dirty, or you're not getting adequate impingement, then streaking and spots will result. And lastly, the fixturing and the galvanic corrosion potential, that could be an issue for you, but those are issues that are obviously easily fixed as well. So that's really all I have, and thank you for your time today. I wanted to remind you that we have another Tech to Tech session coming up on July 8th, and that one is the topic is brightening of yellow metals, and that's going to be presented by Jason Swartz. So on that, I will turn it back over to Chelsea, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Eric. If you would like to discuss this topic further, please contact your local KYZEN representative or send an email to tech@kyzen.com, and we will have one of our cleaning experts schedule a follow-up with you as soon as possible. Again, we thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great day.